What would you do if you came home from war, only to find your girlfriend in the arms of your best friend? That's exactly what happened to Corporal James Harper. After risking his life on the battlefield, he returned to a betrayal so personal, it nearly broke him. But this isn't just a story of heartbreak. It's about justice, redemption, and ultimate revenge. Because James didn't crawl away. He stood back up and exposed everything. This is The Replacement, a powerful emotional story about loyalty, loss, and what happens when the truth finally comes out. Please take the time to like and subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Part 1. The Homecoming. The plane touched down with a hollow thud, but James Harper felt nothing. No rush of joy, no anticipation. Just a quiet emptiness. After 3 tours and 9 years of watching sand slip through his fingers like time, he was home. Except, as the plane taxied and soldiers clapped each other on the back, James stared out the window wondering if he'd brought too much of the desert back with him. His duffel bag sat at his feet, heavy not with gear, but with ghosts. The first thing he did when he landed in Ohio was rent a car. His mother had offered to pick him up, tears in her voice over the phone, but he told her he needed to make a stop. He didn't say where. He wanted it to be a surprise. For Lena. He hadn't seen her in over a year. The last time they'd FaceTimed, she'd been sitting on her couch in her favorite yellow sweater, telling him to hurry back because the world didn't make sense without him. They'd made plans. Vague, hopeful ones about getting a dog, maybe moving to the city, maybe even finally taking that road trip down the coast. James pulled up outside her apartment, dressed in uniform, holding a small bouquet of sunflowers he'd grabbed from a grocery store. He felt foolish standing there with flowers like some teenager, but he didn't care. He missed her. He needed to see her smile. Only, there was no smile, no door opening, no familiar blue car in the driveway. Just a for sale sign, hanging loosely on the porch rail, like a limp flag. He blinked, walked up and rang the bell. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. A neighbor, an older woman with rollers in her hair and a cigarette dangling from her lips, stepped outside with a garbage bag. "You looking for Lena?" she asked, squinting at him. "Yeah, she used to live here. She moved out a few weeks ago, with that guy. Kyle, I think." James felt something shift in his chest, like a stitch popping open. "Kyle?" he repeated. The woman nodded. "Yeah. Said they were moving in together, nice couple. Kinda fast, if you ask me. You okay, honey?" He didn't answer, just nodded and backed away, flowers still clutched in his hand like a lifeline. He dropped them in a trash can near the curb and got back in the car. His throat was dry. His palms itched. Kyle, his best friend, his brother in all but blood. The guy who'd watched his back during their high school football days, and then again during basic training before Kyle got injured and discharged early. James hadn't heard from Kyle in months. He'd figured his buddy was just busy. The next blow came, as James sat in the driver's seat, staring numbly at his phone. Out of instinct, he opened Instagram. He hadn't checked it in weeks. Her profile popped up first. The latest photo punched him straight in the gut. There they were, Lena and Kyle, smiling on a porch, his porch, their arms tangled like vines. The caption read, "Home sweet home," his home, the lake house his grandfather had left to him. The one Lena had said was too rustic to live in full time. The same place he had planned to propose. James drove there that night, not with a plan, not even with anger. Just disbelief, like he needed to confirm the betrayal with his own eyes. Maybe the photo was old. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe. But when he reached the lake and saw Kyle's pickup in the drive, the porch lights on, silhouettes behind gauzy curtains, he stopped cold. He didn't go up to the door, didn't knock. He just sat there watching. A dog barked from inside. Laughter followed. Lena's. He turned the car around and drove into the night. By the time he reached his mother's place, it was close to midnight. She opened the door in a robe, her arms already outstretched. He didn't say a word, just held on. For the first time since Afghanistan, James Harper cried. Part 2. The Fallout. The next few days blurred together. James moved back into his childhood room, a time capsule of posters and trophies that no longer meant anything. He lay on the narrow twin bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it creaked above him like an old war drum. His mom tiptoed around him, offering casseroles and comfort he couldn't absorb. She never asked about Lena. She didn't need to. The pain was written all over his face. Sleep was a distant cousin now. What little he got was broken by dreams he couldn't remember, and the echo of gunfire that never quite left his ears. In town, people greeted him with forced smiles and too much sympathy in their eyes. Everyone knew. Word traveled fast in small places, especially about fallen heroes and women who moved on. There were no welcome home banners, just pity and whispers. "Man, that's rough," said one former classmate he bumped into at the gas station. "I thought you and Lena were like Endgame." James didn't respond. He didn't have the energy. But it was Smoke who broke through the fog. They met at a VA group James's mom practically begged him to attend. He had resisted at first. Sitting in a circle with broken men didn't sound like therapy. It sounded like wallowing. But he went anyway. Smoke was hard to miss. A barrel-chested man in his 50s with deep lines etched into his dark skin and a voice like gravel wrapped in bourbon. He sat slouched with a toothpick in his mouth, eyes scanning everyone like he was still patrolling the perimeter. "You're Harper, huh?" he said when James introduced himself. "Yeah." "You look like you got kicked in the chest and ain't figured out how to breathe yet." James blinked. "That's not inaccurate." Smoke grinned without humor. "They trained us to kill, march, survive. Nobody trains you for the moment the world moves on without you. That's the real battlefield." Over the next week, James started showing up regularly. Not because he loved group therapy, but because it gave him a reason to get out of bed. And Smoke talked straight. No therapy speak. No metaphors. Just truth with the bite left in. "You're not broken," he told James once. "You're bruised, but you ain't got a limp forever." James started volunteering at a local nonprofit helping vets get housing and jobs. At first, it was just paperwork and moving boxes. But soon he found himself listening to stories from guys worse off than him. Homeless, divorced, forgotten. And in listening, he began to heal. Still, the anger brewed underneath, like hot coals under ash. Especially when Kyle's face started popping up around town again, on campaign signs. "Kyle Dempsey for City Council. A voice for our veterans." James stared at one of the signs outside the grocery store, jaw tightening. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through Kyle's new website. There he was, smiling in photos, posing with veterans at events, quoting lines from the letters James had written him overseas. "I fight so others don't have to." Corporal James Harper, quoted by Kyle Dempsey in a campaign speech. James's blood went cold. He hadn't given permission for any of it. Kyle was using him. Again. First Lena, now this. The betrayal stung in a new way. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was public. It was theft. He walked back to his car, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "You wanted a reason to keep breathing. he muttered. Well, here it is. He wasn't going to let Kyle win again. Not this time. Part 3. The Plan. James didn't move quickly. He moved smart. He knew enough from the military to understand that revenge wasn't just about fury. It was about precision. A good plan required intel. And James was patient when he needed to be. He started small, observing. Kyle's campaign was in full swing. He was painting himself as the local veterans advocate, a man of honor who understood the struggles of post-service life. He wore flannel shirts, shook hands at fundraisers, and posted inspiring videos that featured a carefully edited montage of military clips, some of which James suspected were his from their time overseas. James created a fake social media account under a generic name and followed everything. He watched how Kyle spun his narrative, always just vague enough to seem genuine, always just heartfelt enough to avoid questions. But James had questions, and he wasn't going to let them go unanswered. He started talking to people, quietly. Other vets, some mutual friends, old faces from high school who still owed him for helping them pass history class or patching them up after a bad bar fight. Most of what he learned painted the same picture. Kyle had been charming, generous, but always with a side of ambition that made him slippery. One guy at the VA mentioned that Kyle had briefly worked for a real estate developer that was now being quietly investigated for shady evictions in the low-income part of town. James's gut twisted. That was where the city's veteran housing program had just lost 2 buildings. Coincidence? He kept digging. One night, James stayed late at the nonprofit office. He went through grant documents and donor letters. On a whim, he cross-referenced the names of Kyle's biggest campaign donors with city land records and found something interesting. 2 properties recently purchased through a shell company. Properties that used to be earmarked for veteran housing. The signature on the sale documents? Kyle Dempsey, acting as an intermediary consultant. So that was it. Kyle wasn't just faking concern for veterans. He was profiting off of displacing them. James's pulse pounded. He forwarded the documents to himself, made backups, and started outlining his own speech. If Kyle wanted to play politician, fine. James would show him what happened when the truth went public. But truth wasn't the only card he held. He still hadn't confronted Lena. He didn't even know if she'd been complicit. Maybe Kyle had manipulated her too. Maybe she genuinely believed James wouldn't come back. Maybe he needed closure. So he sent her a message. Just 4 words. We need to talk. She responded within the hour, asked if they could meet, suggested a quiet coffee shop in the next town over, where nobody would recognize them. He agreed. When James arrived, she was already there, wearing that same yellow sweater from their last video call. She looked thinner, more tired. Her eyes widened when she saw him, then dropped to the table. "Hi," she said softly. He sat, folded his hands. "You moved on fast." Lena flinched. "I didn't plan it. I didn't mean for it to happen like that." "But it did." She swallowed. "After a while, I thought maybe you weren't coming back. You stopped replying for weeks at a time. You sounded different, distant. Kyle, he was around. He helped. He listened." James narrowed his eyes. "He also moved into my house." "I didn't know he put it in his name," she said quickly. "He told me you gave it up, that it was a joint decision before your last tour." James's heart sank. "That's a lie." Her face changed. "I swear, James, I didn't know. I thought you were done with me." He leaned back. Maybe she had believed it. Maybe she hadn't. But the damage was done. Still, something didn't sit right. "Why him?" James asked. She hesitated. Then quietly, he showed me emails. Said you'd been seeing someone overseas, that you weren't planning to come home at all. James blinked. What emails? Her voice cracked. He printed them, showed me, said you told him everything. He even showed me a photo. He sat there stunned. There had been no emails, no affair, no photo, unless something had been fabricated. Kyle had planned this, carefully, intentionally. He'd wanted Lena. He'd wanted James's home, his story, his reputation. And now he wanted power. James felt the heat rise again, but this time it was calm and controlled. Thank you, he said, standing. That's all I needed to know. Lena's voice trembled behind him. James, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. He didn't look back. You don't need to mean something to be responsible for it. He walked out and into the rain. Part 4. The Turn. The day of the town hall was cloudy, humid, and tense with anticipation. Kyle stood at the podium, delivering his usual polished speech about community values and his veteran-first policy proposals. He had even invited a few local vets, most of them hand-picked, older men in ball caps who didn't ask questions and liked the free lunch. James stood in the back. He wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans, boots, and a fitted t-shirt that revealed the long scar on his forearm, a souvenir from a roadside bomb in Fallujah. Kyle saw him mid-sentence and faltered for just a second, recovered, carried on. But that pause told James everything. Kyle knew something was coming, and he was right. When the Q&A opened, James stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse or yell. He asked one question. Councilman candidate Dempsey, can you explain why your name is on property transfer documents connected to the closure of veteran housing on 5th and Locke? The room froze. A few heads turned. Kyle blinked. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Corporal Harper. James nodded. Then let me clarify. He pulled out a folder, stepped toward the front, placed it on the podium like a gift wrapped in consequence. In there, you'll find copies of 2 real estate transactions listing you as an intermediary for a shell company tied to Lennox Development Group, the same group now evicting former service members for condo conversions. That shell company received over $200,000 in redirected funds meant for veteran rehabilitation. He turned to the crowd. I can also provide emails between Mr. Dempsey and members of the zoning board, pushing for reclassification of those areas, conveniently just before his campaign was launched. A murmur moved through the audience. James's voice didn't waver. I'd also like to point out that Mr. Dempsey misappropriated quotes from my personal letters and military service to advance his political platform, without consent, without truth, and while I was still deployed. Kyle's face had gone pale. He reached for the mic. These are baseless accusations from a bitter veteran, James interrupted. One you claimed to support. Then he looked directly at the local news anchor recording in the front row. I'd be happy to speak on record. Would you? The camera light turned on, and just like that, the tides turned. Part 5. The Consequences. It took less than 48 hours for the story to spread. First, it was local news. Then a regional veterans blog picked it up. By the weekend, Kyle Dempsey's campaign page had been flooded with comments demanding answers. A formal ethics investigation was launched. Donors began to back away. His photo was removed from the nonprofit's website. Lena messaged James once. Just 3 words. I'm so sorry. He didn't respond. Closure wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came like a door clicking shut behind you as you walked into a new room. James didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. But there was peace now. A clean, level feeling in his chest where the rage used to sit. Smoke chuckled when he heard what happened. You lit that fire with a match and a smile. That's how you do it. James smiled faintly. I didn't want revenge. Not really. Smoke raised an eyebrow. Sure you didn't. James laughed. Okay, maybe I did, but I wanted justice more. He kept volunteering. More vets started coming to the center after the story broke. Some said it made them feel seen. Others just wanted someone to talk to who understood the weight of coming home different than you left. He started writing too. Articles, essays, maybe one day a book. Not about war, but about coming back. About surviving people, not just battles. Part 6. The New Mission. A year later, James stood on the steps of the same town hall, but this time as a guest speaker for a new initiative called Vet Forward. It was a grassroots effort to offer career training, therapy, and reintegration support from people who'd lived it. When he spoke, the room was silent. No lies, no politics, just truth. He glanced at the audience. Smoke sat in the front row, nodding. A few of the same guys from his first group therapy meeting were now leaders of their own peer circles. Even his mother had come, smiling proudly, a silent rock in the background. James took a breath. You don't come home from war the same man, but you don't have to stay lost either. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. He paused, looked out at them. And sometimes justice means showing the world who the real heroes are, not the ones with slogans, but the ones who keep showing up, even when it hurts. The applause was quiet at first, then louder, sustained. Later that night, he sat alone in his truck, the old dog tags hanging from the rearview mirror. The radio hummed low. A breeze slipped in through the cracked window. He felt good. Not perfect, not whole, but rebuilt. And his story was just beginning. Not every battle is fought overseas. Some of the hardest wars happen when you come home. James lost everything. His love, his trust, even his place in the world. But from that loss he found purpose. He didn't just survive betrayal. He turned it into justice. Not by screaming, not with violence, but by standing in the truth until it echoed loud enough to bring the walls down. This wasn't just revenge, it was redemption. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply rebuilding a life they can never touch again. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell for more powerful stories every week. And remember, your story isn't over, it's just getting started.